Greetings in the name of God, the beneficent, the merciful. In the name of his Christ, we want to greet all of you and thank you for watching Knowledge for Life's Knowledge Cipher, where we aim to discuss health and wellness issues impacting the Black community, issues from physical health to mental health, which is all connected. And you can follow us on the social media platforms. You can go to our website at Know for Life. It's KNOW, the number 4, LIFE.net. And we're going to have on that website some reference material that we have from today's powerful podcast. And today what we're going to be talking about is a topic that really impacts every Black man and Black woman that is born in America. This that we're going to be talking about today is somewhat like a disease, but it is a dis-ease of the mind. And so we're going to be talking today about generational trauma. And today we have with us, and we're going to start off with Sister Angelica X. And she is a servant of Allah, a follower of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, a healing coach, public speaker, mother, podcast host of Healing with Angelica podcast. And she was born in Dayton, Ohio, November the 9th, 1949. Nice. That is very 1994.
Yeah, I'm like, uh-oh. You trying to give me old age? Right?
Yeah, I'm already starting some trauma. She says, spreading awareness on health, knowledge of self, truth, and healing to achieve heaven on earth now. You've done countless numbers of interviews and podcasts, and we invited you and you spoke at one of our block parties, which was very powerful. And you worked with notable figures like the student minister Nuri Muhammad, student minister Dr. Wesley Muhammad, Brother Ben X, and recently Brother Riza. And also you have interviewed the national assistant to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, student minister Ishmael Muhammad. Excellent job.
Praise be to Allah.
Next we have Mr. Keith Vukasanovic. And you are a yogi, and we're going to get into that as well. A therapist, a content creator, a brother, a friend, a husband, a father, and approximately 10,000 other roles. Birthplace is Youngstown, Ohio, just up the road. And you reside now in Dayton since 1997. You have a graduate degrees from Youngstown State University and the University of Cincinnati, a postmaster certificate from Case Western Reserve University and Kellogg School of Management. And the best part, you've been married for 25 years with the father of 4 adult children. That's wonderful. So I know that you got plenty to talk about when it comes down to trauma. And we have Dr. Julius Beckham, PhD, MPA. And your current position is you're an assistant director of special services, Huber Heights City School District, the state of Ohio. Over 25 years of educational experience. You are a school psychologist, administrator, intervention specialist, adjunct professor, a PhD in educational leadership from Miami University. Your Master's of Public Administration at Wright State University, a Master of Education at the University of Dayton, a Bachelor of Science in Psychology at Central State University, and you're a certified nonprofit professional and consult and serves on various boards throughout Ohio. And you are the father of 2 adult children, and you have 2 beautiful grandchildren, I think one of which is in the studio with us today. All right, that's fantastic. So let's go ahead and get right on into our subject. And we are talking about the subject of generational trauma. So I'll start with you, Dr. Beckham. If you can first help us to understand what generational trauma is?
It's a very broad topic, and sometimes you have to give examples to for people to understand it. Any act or acts towards a individual that is taken on the social form to a group that is transferred to generation. And I'd like to give an example so people can understand it a little bit better, and it relates directly to the particular area that we're living in right now in the Dayton area. When I was growing up, born and raised in Dayton, Ohio, as a young boy, you never saw any geese. There are geese everywhere. And so as I grew older, I mean, for some reason, I got into a circle of professionals, and I was wondering about why we have all these geese. And this was the story they told me. They was telling me the answer. Well, someone was doing some experimental, some animal research. And what they did was the geese that they were doing the experiment on, they clipped their wings. And so the experiment went well, but as soon as those particular geese had young children, they couldn't teach their children how to fly. And so what happened was they never flew south for the winter.
Wow.
And so we have a population of geese that continue to grow and grow and grow. There's no natural predators here.
Right.
And so they just continue to grow and grow and grow. And I relate that to generational trauma simply because it happened to one generation, but you couldn't teach the next generation how to overcome that. And so you got a cycle of geese that don't know how to fly south for the winter.
Wow, that's a powerful. And we're gonna, hopefully we can touch more on that and get a little deeper. Would any of you like to expound a little bit more on that or add to that?
I think when we're talking about the issues of trauma in our community, a lot of it goes back to one of America's original sins in slavery. And that sometimes it seems difficult for mainstream America to acknowledge that the Black community in America is by and large a traumatized community. It's interesting how you can give them examples of somebody being in a domestic violence situation or maybe growing up in a household with a violent father, and they can understand how that could impact the behaviors of the child. But when you ask them, okay, well, let's extrapolate from that. You have generations of physical abuse, torture, rape, humiliation, without any potential of escape or any hope for generation upon generation. Can that have an impact on someone's behavior? And they wince. No, yeah, it does. It does. And the inability to acknowledge that is, I think, a continuation of the victimization that we experience as a community, because they won't even admit that this is a real phenomena.
Right.
You know, and it's like sitting around watching. We got all these geese that can't fly.
Right.
Okay. They're not indigenous to here. It's interesting. In South Africa, you notice a lot of trees, but it used to be a prairie land. There's all the trees are from Australia, South America, Central America. There are very few indigenous trees, but there's a lot of trees outside Johannesburg. Okay. So there's things that don't fit the narrative, and they're inconvenient to America to have to acknowledge the victimization we experienced for hundreds of years here.
Right.
And what impact that's had on us as a community today.
Sister Angelica, would you like to say anything on that?
Well, yeah, I definitely agree with both of you guys on you guys' input on generational trauma. What I got most from what you said was just the not being able to take the accountability. I think that's a big issue. When I think about generational trauma, also think about just the transmission of the trauma experience one has went through. And because, like you said, it goes all the way back from, they call it post-traumatic slave disorder, from things that our ancestors has went through. And of course, they didn't have the tools or resources to express that. And when they had children, it ended up being a cycle of trauma that wasn't being able to be expressed. So now we're in this generation of suppressed trauma to where it's now taking a global effect on the world, actually, because when you see these issues happening, you see how it's playing its role on I want to say like the physical plane, just in our environment and what we do on a day-to-day basis, what our children are doing on a day-to-day basis. So it's really unfortunate. I think it also comes to, again, like you stated, just being able to take accountability and being aware that, hey, I may not have grew up with this trauma, or I didn't cause this trauma on myself. However, I am aware of this trauma. So I'm going to take that first step to fix it by dealing with things that I'm going through personally. And I think as a young mother, and things that I've been through growing up, seeing that it really wasn't my fault, just seeing what my mom and my dad and what they went through. You see the cycle. It's really a continuous cycle that you have to make the decision to break. So we just gotta want to make that decision to break it. Sometimes it starts with one person just being able to be like, hey, I see the issues, let me stop it here.
Right.
And it's by stopping those behaviors. It also comes to addressing some of the behaviors you have, and that doing that self-analysis with self.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. And, just touching on something that you talked about was the term generational trauma. Like you were saying, when I was doing some research, it was saying that the term generational trauma actually came out of studying those who came out of the Holocaust. And so that right there touches on the fact that, so our 400 years, you couldn't have come up with this term. You're going to come up with, and this is not to, side shuffle the Holocaust, but as Dr. Khalid said, we paid a hell of a cost for 400 years. And so, if we can talk a little bit about what you talked about recognizing our trauma, right? So to a large degree, we kind of like normalized where we don't even recognize that certain things that we do. Can you talk on that?
Yeah, sometimes bottom line, it injures our subconscious, especially when they are exchanged for values and norms that have been taught to us. Now, I can tell you just like one just very easily that everyone here can relate to, but when you really think about it, is it logical? This is the example. As a person of color driving in your car and you hear a police siren, how do you feel? Most people of color will tell you they feel some type of anxiety, no matter how they're driving, no matter what they've done, because that trauma has been placed upon them, that anxiety has been placed upon them because of established norms in your culture of beware.
Yeah. And that bewareness that we all live with is like so much stress in the body. Can you talk about some of the harmful effects? Because I know that because you practice yoga, you definitely understand how we need to center ourselves and, get control of our emotions and things like that.
Most of us from chronic exposure to stress, do not know how to relax. And some of the ways we self-medicate, okay? And I mean, from things like alcohol and marijuana to porn addiction or just checking out in general. We learn to major in minor stuff rather than pay attention to fundamentally important things. Trauma forces you into a space where basically you've stayed on high alert for so long that eventually you get to the point where your internal resources are depleted. And there's almost a sense of learned helplessness that happens at that point. Somebody got elected in 2016. I won't say their name, but I felt like every time I looked at the TV, I was having the same experience as a little kid when I saw Jaws for the first time. It was like, whoa, and then, but after 5-6 months, every time the news comes on, you feel like you should be hiding behind the couch you just get to the point where you're like, man, whatever. It's just, it is what it is. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We got a couple 100 years of that here in America, as the experience of every day is something new. I mean, come on, we all know we got to a point where you couldn't get over one police shooting before there was another one, let alone the instances of us being violent towards each other because we've learned not to appreciate the value of Black life in our own communities. It's a nonstop assault on the psyche of us as individuals and as a community. And we get to a spot where we become unwitting participants in our own continued victimization. So we've got to learn how to self-regulate, where we are in control of our own emotions and our own behavior, but we've also got to learn how to co-regulate and to be in healthy spaces in our relationships with other folks, in our relationships with our sisters, our other brothers, the children we're raising in the community, respectful interactions with our elders. Everything's been damaged from the violent legacy of slavery in America. And and as uncomfortable as mainstream America is in having a conversation about the brutal legacy of slavery, a part of that cannot be ignored is the rape culture of America that went along with that. And if it doesn't want to acknowledge that America's founded on brutal chattel slavery, it darn sure don't want to have no conversations about the fact that rape was not a flaw of, but rather a feature of that system, a perk, if you will, that still haunts us as a community. So there's a lot of things that are sins buried in sand that America would rather we just leave in place, but things buried in sand always have a way of surfacing, and it comes into our relationships, our communities, how we handle our relationship with education. And for me, it's been interesting in my studies to see the difference between how we function as a community here and how we function as communities in the African countries that I've visited. We are not the same Black folks in the diaspora versus on the continent. And so much of what we think is Black culture here, it's not. It's got its roots in slavery, not the beautiful legacies we had before that.
Yeah.
And that.
So touching on that point, what I would like for us to do is I want to go around the room, and if we can talk on a traumatic experience that we as Black people have faced, and how it resulted in an abnormal behavior, but how that abnormal behavior in our community is normalized, if you understand what I'm saying.
Okay.
Dr. Beckham, would you like to touch on one, or would you like me to go first?
I'll have you go first.
Okay, I'll go first. So I read this book by the Nation of Islam. It was called How White Folks Got So Rich. And what it talked about was how, as Black people got out of slavery, how we built towns. And many of us were very successful because we were the ones who were doing all the labor and building all the homes. So these towns, white people had to come to us. But one of the things that this book talks about is how many of our wealthy people, they would put their money in the banks, and the white man would come and just take their money out of the bank and burn the bank down. And in many situations, he would use this, he would use the cry of the white woman, the rape charge, to just come and burn whole towns down. And it said that as a result, Black people, instead of having an entrepreneurial mind, that we started to say, well, you can't save your money. Go ahead and wear your success around your neck or on your hands. So we, instead of starting a business, we would, have the gold and silver necklaces and things like that as a conditioning.
Liquefy your resources so you can take them with you.
Exactly.
So would anyone like to give another example of how
I think even how we define manhood in the Black community,
Mm-hmm.
the default setting of what that means to many unfocused brothers, okay, is that they see themselves, they will escalate to violence quickly with another Black man, you know, because I'm gonna have my respect from you because I can't get it anywhere else. It's kind of the subtitle there in this system, and they don't understand that the things that they consider to be expressions of manhood are things that were how plantation owners defined desirable slaves. You wanted a strong buck who, if you wanted to fight him, could fight. And even all the better if he could make a bunch of more slaves for you. So some of the standards around sexual discipline have gotten lax because average brother does gauge himself by what he has between his legs rather than, you know, the content of his character, the accomplishments of his mind, those sorts of things. We don't understand at times how our default settings for what media will push, especially for us, as well, these are these are real men. Nah, that's a toxic, slavish description of manhood.
Right.
It's not what is a healthy for us individually, for us as a community definition of manhood. But mainstream society is never going to push that. There is no fundamental good outcome for America if brothers start behaving with a sense of self-discipline and commitment to their communities and being disciplined about their spending and so we're never going to get that message. So we have to we have to replace the scripts we've been given with the ones that we know we need.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Definitely. Sister, would you like to?
As you guys were talking, something came up about just broken homes, how we see a lot of broken homes now. And I believe, I'm not going to say it verbatim, but I know I did a show with Brother Nuri, and Brother Nuri Muhammad, he had went back and talked about just how the man and female relationship, how it's so it's so divided, it's messed up even more now than ever, and how it really goes back to slavery days where the man was taken out of the home, and how it was times where the man felt not able to help the Black woman when the slave master wanted to come in and do whatever he wanted to do with her. So with the sense of that, it took a toll, and also making the woman be in a position of independence, to where I believe now it's okay to have a certain independence, but it comes now to, because where we see it now, they're still doing it, with public assistance, with the single homes. They're continuously making sure the Black man is not in the home. Just again, as I would say back in the slavery days, how the division of the relationship between a Black man and Black woman was hard to come by because of that, that whole with the slave master was, keeping it, from not coming together. With just certain things that was going on, really suppressing the Black man and what his natural job is to do, and is to take care and protect and provide. And when the Black man knew at that time he wasn't able to do that for the woman, I think, as generations, continue to come up, it really, wedged into our DNA and some as men to believe that that's not their duty. That's not what they should do. Right. So I think that's really a big thing that really bothers me, because when we see these broken homes, we see these so-called drama and beef between a man and a woman. We don't see how much it affects the children. Right. That's a big issue, because you have single moms growing up in a single home. You have, young boys looking at their mother growing up and may, take on the habits of their mother. So you can kind of tell when a boy has been raised by a mother versus an actual family. So It's just a lot, and it really just goes back to, you know, how detrimental it is for us to rebuild the Black family in general.
Yeah.
So we can stop the generational curse, they want to say, or trauma
Yeah.
that we're going through, because we need each other.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's good. No, because I think, you know, I remember when the Willie Lynch letter came out, and everyone was talking about Willie Lynch and the major, I guess, theme or the major act that he wanted to implement was the destruction of the family structure, and to put the female up as the head of the male, and to just reverse that whole dynamic and throw everything out of whack. Can you talk a little bit about, we were talking about how this constant stress and this trauma changes and is passed down through generations. Can you talk a little bit about that on a mental level, and if you would, on a cellular level with what they call epigenetics?
Fear. You can teach your children as far as what you think is important for them to be afraid of, and it is passed down because at some particular time that is a real threat. Okay, and so there are warnings that you teach both socially and through your behaviors to your children, because they're always observing and learning at every single moment in time. Now, how it relates to epigenetics is this. We are all concerned right now because we're seeing the results of infantile mortality, especially in Black females here in the United States, because if you compare it to other minorities in other countries, they don't have that issue.
Right.
Okay. Their kids are not dying stillborn. Okay. And it's because the stress that we put upon ourselves as far as in survival in this particular world that they don't understand and trying to get a hold of too. Both the relationship as far as what my lady was talking here, as far as with the Black man, as far as they have stress as well, okay? Because their stress is taking that man's seat, okay? In which it shouldn't be just one person there, supporting the whole family and trying to be feminine at the same time. And so the thing about it is that how it relates on the cellular level, listen, we can see it because our children are dying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, when we look at the suicide rate, you know, when I was growing up, it was taboo, and you know, it really wasn't even heard of as far as a Black person committing suicide, because I think still at that time we still were very heavily spiritual, but we have kind of you know, young people, we don't see them in the churches or in the houses of worship like we used to. They've kind of rejected, you know, spirituality. And I think as a consequence of just throwing out the baby with the bathwater, when it comes down to certain stresses, that there's nowhere to turn to and there's no hope, you know.
As it relates to that trauma you were talking about, is that the fact is that many of us have turned to acculturation of the majority culture. And so when we were in a supportive environment with our families, okay, because everyone was under the same roof or even the same neighborhood, well, we started adopting the majority culture, okay? And what happened was that particular culture changes your mindset as far as what you want out of life and how you treat other people. That mindset is get yours. And so we moved away, okay? And we moved away, and we don't give resources back to that particular family. We don't put away side monies and resources saying I'm going to take care of the next generation. I'm going to take care of mom and dad. I'm going to make sure that grandma basically is taken care of, because they're thinking about themselves. And that's one of the things that is taken away from us generationally, that we can tell instantly, because that support system is not there. And that's when that support system is not there, you get more anxiety and stress. Therefore, you get more suicides.
Man, can we talk a little bit about adaptive? I know we're talking about this already, but adaptive behavior and survival behavior are, and just to give a brief understanding, is basically how we respond to our environment to ensure survival and reproduction. What are adaptive and survival behaviors that we have adopted that are negative. And one of the things, if you can talk a little bit more, you talked about what's called learned helplessness. Can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe also give some examples like the tethered elephant and, you know?
Yep. The tethered elephant is a classic example of learned helplessness. That when you have an elephant in a circus and it's a baby, they will typically tie a thick rope around its foot and tether it to basically a stake in the ground. And it's a strong enough rope that a baby elephant can't break it. So, elephant pulls, and eventually just gives up. Well, as the elephant grows into adulthood, you never have to change the size of the rope. Even though the rope has long since no longer been effective, if that elephant wanted to pull that stake up and tear everybody apart, it could. I know we got low-key chased off by an elephant while we were in Botswana.
Wow.
It didn't want us near, and we moved.
Okay.
But circus-bred elephants have learned that the rope can't be broken. We see that in our communities when you hear our kids say things like, there's no point in education. I can't. My daddy went to prison. That's probably where I'm going to end up. Or these streets are all I got. That there's the heck with it. I'll just accept the cards I got in front of me, rather than striving like generations previously did to put up. Maybe they didn't even think that they would see better, but they wanted their kids to be better. But part of the problem nowadays is that we don't raise our kids anymore. Since 2010, the majority influence in most kids' lives is social media, not their parents or even their immediate peers. And that had a catastrophic impact on our youth.
And I would, you bring up a good point, because I would suggest for people to go back and read an old time book by Jawanza Kunjufu on the destruction of black boys, countering the conspiracy.
Wow.
And in there, he gave a hierarchy of what our influences. And at that time, I think it was because we didn't really have social media. That was a while ago. But anyway, because we didn't have that social media, we had rap, though. Rap was very influential, and it had replaced the home, which was at one point in time where we would get our influence from, then the church and so forth. And now it's flipped, where the church and the home are down at the bottom, and all these external forces that we really don't control are influencing our young people.
Yeah, Brother Kunjufu dropped a whole lot of knowledge on us. And I recently listened to a recording of his from when he was in Cincinnati back in 1984. And if you changed a few things about the language, you would never know
the difference.
that was 1984. But the issues in our community, they're not new. If you read The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, which is at this point 100 years old, if you changed it from Negro to black man, nobody would know it was written 100 years ago. I actually was the undergraduate. Jawanza Kunjufu was on the campus at Youngstown State University. The brother said something that I've remembered for 30 years because, like a lot of young men in that moment, I really wasn't paying attention.
Right.
Okay. As a matter of fact, I was trying to holler at the girl that was standing next to me in the doorway while he was lecturing. And he looked over, and unfortunately, I had on my fraternity shirt at the time. He said, and until we can get a young brother to pursue education with the same intensity that brother pursued that shirt, or as he's pursuing that girl right now, we're going to have these problems. And I just kind of stopped and went and sat my butt down and listened to the rest of his lecture. But it wasn't inaccurate. Okay. We've got to find a way to get us passionate about the things that are actually positive. But that and that will help address the trauma, because trauma in a lot of ways is us not having addressed pain and unhappiness. And instead of accurately labeling it as pain and unhappiness, we want to, and I don't mean us, I mean mainstream, the mental health industrial complex wants to frame it as symptoms, categories, and disorders.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to do that and try and force medication on the issue. than it is to address the fact that there's a need for healing. 'Cause, again, it does not serve America's capitalist interests for us to heal.
Because bottom line is monetized.
Oh yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. You know, and that's something that America's philanthropy only extends as far as its ability to make a dime off of it, and no further. And that's something that, if there's a value that we can work against, it's the getting back to a focus on our collective interest in each other and our survival. You know, the old TV show Roots. I know we all remember it. The scene I love the most in there is one where LeVar Burton, Kente, is on the slave ship, and he says to Wrestler, he goes, "I don't understand the languages being spoken around me." And Wrestler says to him, "Men chained together are brothers." Whether or not we necessarily understand everybody's perspective or see things the same way, we are chained together here. And we have to work for the collective interest of each other.
That's beautiful. Dr. Beckham, can you talk about what's called, well, I'll say Stockholm Syndrome, but can you talk about our, where this self-hatred and really this reliance on our captors, how that formed, as you were talking about a domesticated elephant, right? We're domesticated human beings, where you see a animal born in the wild can take care of itself. But in truth, I think if we were let loose by ourselves at this point in time, because of our minds being so damaged, that we, may not survive.
It goes back to when we were speaking about Willie Lynch. It was by design. Okay. Although we're in this space right now, we also have to understand that we were not seen as men. We were seen as property. We were seen as animals. Okay. And that's the way we were treated. And so therefore, many of us still believe that subconsciously in our particular head, as far as how we relate, as far as in this everyday world. And we had to not internalize it for ourselves. Many of us wanted to wait till somebody else told us we were not. Okay. I shouldn't have to wait for you to tell me I'm a man. I should know I'm a man, because we've been so damaged. Now, I always thought about this while I was in school getting my undergraduate as far as a psychologist. They always talking about to be self-actualized under Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We've been so damaged. I always wonder, I was like, can a Black man actually be self-actualized? And that was the question I'm bringing through my head my whole college career.
Right.
Simply because of all the layers that we have to unpeel in order to move forward. What my sister here was talking about as far as recognizing that's the only way to move forward brings upon the old African proverb of Sankofa. We got to look back and understand what we've been through and what we're doing, what we are, in order to move forward.
Yeah. So, Sister Angelica, I wanted to ask you, there are many organizations and programs that we see on the internet that have done excellent jobs in reforming Black people and having us stand upright. And of course, the Nation of Islam is one of the best examples. Malcolm X, we know, was it Detroit Red or something like that? And, so can you tell us a little bit about that process within the nation of how it reforms Black men and women?
Well, I can definitely say that within a nation, you're able to really get the true knowledge of who you are. I believe that everything starts with self. That's what we've been taught, self. And it's not until we are actually open to recognizing that we don't really know who we are. We've been told who we are. And with me coming into the nation, I joined the nation 2 years ago, 27, me being young, it really opened my eyes to see wow, so many things that's been hidden from me, so many things that's been, not told to me. And, not blaming my parents just because, they didn't know, but also seeing that now I have a duty to fulfill. So within that, I can just say that with me joining the nation, it really opened my eyes to actually knowing who I truly am, who I am as a Black woman, what is my duty, what is my role, and also having an understanding of our people and what our people been through. It's just a wide knowledge of understanding, and that's when we're able to come into the knowledge of self. That is when we're going to be able to awaken to what it is that we need to do as a culture, as individuals, as a race, so yeah.
Okay. All right. So as we're beginning to wind down, we want to definitely look at some solutions. And I hope you all don't mind us just going over just a little bit. I just wanted to ask, how is the issue of trauma, because you both touched on it, being manipulated by the mental health industry complex? And I'll start with yourself.
Trauma has become the new buzzword.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is one of, I'll be honest, this is one of my pet peeves. Okay. Because I have years of training that are specific to trauma. But we got folks out here who run out here and go to a 1 day or 2 day online
ACEs study
workshop, and now are out here representing themselves as trauma informed and this, that, and the other. And you can't even begin to have a surface appreciation of how big of a topic the issue of trauma is. And unfortunately, because we have so many folks out here in the community, we don't traditionally access mental health services in our community. So that's where this becomes manipulated, because just because we don't access the service does not mean we don't need it. Okay. And there's a lot of us who are hurting. So we hear that this brother, this sister over here is a trauma expert, and then we lean on them for help, and they don't know.
Because they have no understanding.
Yes, they know less than nothing. They know just enough to be dangerous. Okay. So the person has the interaction with them. It is not helpful. If anything, it's re-traumatizing. And then they walk away from that saying, well, see, therapy doesn't work. No, that just wasn't a therapist. That was a snake oil salesman. Okay. Between that on one side, and then now we have pushback where you have mainstream going, oh, all y'all talk about is trauma. Yeah, just because it's an inconvenient topic doesn't mean it's false.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
And they would rather
stick their heads in the sand.
Right, exactly. Or shift the conversation to anything else. So they're going to try and water the discussion of trauma down so much that we're not actually having any substantive discourse about it anymore.
Right.
But you do have some folks who are very much pushing back. The sister, Dr. DeGury, who wrote the Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome.
Right.
And we have people who've been writing on this issue for decades. We've mentioned a few of them. You got Paulo Freire, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Brother Freedom.
Yeah, Brother Naeem Akbar.
One of my favorite, Dr. Amos Wilson.
Yeah, Bobby Wright, The Psychopathic Racial Personality, talking about how mainstream America interacts with other folks.
Right. Just as we open this up, right, we'll just open up the floor and just kick it, right? But as we close it out. And so, one of the things like you're talking about is, there was this stigma. And I think, of course, the stigma was put there by design, and, when I was growing up, too, one of the things that I was told was that was back then, leave that type of history, slave history alone. Don't learn about that. All the while, you got Schindler's List. You got a number of, movies that are talking about the Holocaust and what the Jewish people went through, so they can have a firm understanding and they can say never again, right? But there's a saying that those who don't learn from the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them.
One of my favorite quotes from a German philosopher, Nietzsche, is that if don't be so busy fighting a monster that you don't become one in the process, because it's an amazing thing to go from being on the experiencing end of a Holocaust to inflicting one on another group of people.
Mhm.
So we always have to be mindful that trauma can lead us collectively to some very
Yeah.
ugly places.
Hurt people. Hurt people.
Right,
Said that
right.
today.
And like, and what do you think about when we talked about in the beginning that there's no black man or woman who has escaped trauma? Can you help us maybe understand that? Is that true? Would that be a true
Well,
statement?
because there's so many layers, not just independently of themselves, but there's social layers as far as the people that they're dealing with too. All your surroundings, and including the majority population as well, as far as how it is inflicting upon you. I'll put it like this. We talked about how we're getting reactions to it. Okay. For those of us that are trying to build up a particular people,
Mhm.
both mentally, socially, economically, okay, you have to face that trauma in order to do so.
Yeah.
But you get a reaction as well from the opposite side.
Mm.
So you wonder why they're trying to take critical race theory out of the schools and everything, because they are avoiding the fact that there is a shift or a change or some transformative nature.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, most of the times it comes down to capitalism.
Yeah.
But then again, you have to think about as far as it, how is it affecting everyone? Okay. You can't escape from it.
No. And that's a good point. That, like you said, what we see down in Florida with DeSantis and banning, certain curriculum that deals with Black history, and not really recognizing what we've been through. It not only causes our children to be lost, but it causes their children to see us as Black people in a way that is distorted, if you will. And it then gives fuel to this make America great again mentality that we see among white people.
Well, some of that's to not just, they know their crimes.
Mm-hmm.
They would prefer their
To forget
children did not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because
Avoidance.
in the information age, it's a difficult space for old white America to have to acknowledge to young white America how monstrous
Mm-hmm.
its behavior was. Because, some of the folks sitting around chinning and grinning in those pictures of lynchings that we saw, that's grandma and grandpa sitting at the Thanksgiving table, okay? And that's an uncomfortable space to be in when you have to acknowledge in front of your kids that you were either a passive accepting or willing participant in some of the ugliest episodes of American history. I just got back from South Africa, and it was amazing to be in a space where I felt like I was watching a country trying to survive the aftermath of an apartheid regime, as it looks like we're hell bent to go into one. And it's staggering to see the level of adversity that we have just gotten on cruise control. We don't even acknowledge is even here anymore. We've gotten so used to we've normalized the abusive situation we're in. It's almost like we've all known that person was in a bad relationship they weren't ever going to get out of, not because they were trapped, but just because now they were a willing participant in their own victimization. It's tough. We got a lot of work to do.
A lot of work. And so as we close it on out, what are some of the things that we can do to foster healing in our community? And how important is it to get a culturally competent therapist?
I think the best thing we can do to foster healing is, for one, be an example. Be an example of healing. Actually take those steps to actually heal. And once you get to that point, and like my brother was saying, don't just get healing for a day and then say, oh, I'm a healer, I can help you. Like, actually do the work of healing. And once you get to that point, have others join you on that healing journey.
How do they start that journey?
Honestly, I would say it's first just actually accepting. You have to accept it first. But I believe it's just first recognizing it. And if you have someone that, you know, you feel comfortable talking to about it, someone that you're close with talking to about it, you know, start by talking to someone about that, whatever it is that you're starting to see and recognize within yourself. But I always believe, you know, I think we all, everything that we see on a physical aspect starts from the spiritual. Mm-hmm. So if we can get reconnected back into our spiritual self, connect with Allah, God, you know, and really be able to understand ourselves through Him, then we're able to actually address the issues for ourselves. Because a lot of the times we can really, I mean, we can have people, you know, on a healing journey with us and people to help us. But, you know, honestly, if you really get back connected, you know, to God and really just ask for that help, you know, He will really see you through it and actually guide you into what it is that you need to do to heal whatever trauma that you have. So for me, it starts with God.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right.
Really check your relationship with Allah, God.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on with that? What's your spiritual connection?
Right.
You know, are you praying? Are you fasting? What are you doing? Mm-hmm. Because I can say for myself, you know, it started from me actually getting reconnected with first who I am. But I wasn't able to know who I was until I actually knew who God was. Mm-hmm. Who is God to me? Mm-hmm. You know, what is my spiritual connection? Mm-hmm. And from there, everything else just came into fold. So
yeah. And that spiritual connection is something that's kind of underrated today. You know, I think, you know, I did a book, it's called Immunity Empowerment. Mm-hmm. And this book, Immunity Empowerment, I did research and it said that not only is prayer, you know, beneficial to your mental health, but it says that people who pray for you can even, there's energy that we don't even really understand fully about that spiritual connection. As the Christians say, have Jesus as your personal savior. Have a personal relationship with whatever you may call that supreme force. Dr. Beckham, how about yourself?
I'll definitely speak on that. We often talk about IQ, intelligence quotient, and now they're starting to talk about EQ, emotional intelligence, but we rarely talk about a spiritual IQ. And that is definitely as far as what is needed, because we find that people who have what we tend to call, to broaden it out so we won't offend people, spirituality, they tend to have a better, well-balanced life. They feel more comfortable. They feel more at ease. They have less stress because they are not dependent upon the world. And for instance, they're depending upon their spiritual relationship and how they deal with everyday life. And in order to do that, you can find that in different ways to do it, whether it's meditation, whether it's prayer, whether it's through group affiliation, doing it as well. Having that support group that also practices that as well is also beneficial, because that brings forth a network system in order for you to help practice. And so we see many different things as far as that benefit us, but we haven't often relied on or have shied away from.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, another thing that I think is, underrated is just a walk in the park. Just getting out and getting into nature, and what do they call it? Going hugging a tree. Now, maybe not. You know, maybe not.
Actually, in the Asian culture, they call it tree bathing.
Tree bathing. I've done that. Like, it's something about getting into nature. Like, it's just, man. Like, I've been studying this book, and it was just saying, just like after a long day of working, you know, like take an hour and just go outside and walk. Just like be in the moment. Yeah. We're not present anymore. Mm-hmm. We're on like automation on these phones, and it's really taking our attention away from reality, like our reality, you know, what we have here in front of us.
Yeah. And it's funny because there was a program that talked about people who go on a vacation and they never really enjoy the vacation because they're just snapping all these photos and they're not living, they're not experiencing their surroundings. And the only thing that they got of a memory is behind this camera lens. And that's a shame.
Oh, yeah. We got to unplug and reconnect. Because there's a sense of wellness of reestablishing your relationship with everything greater than yourself. But as long as all your pursuits are about your personal satisfaction, your personal entertainment, those are the things that America will have you so busy trying to pursue what you want that you will forget to pay attention to what you need. Okay, and that to me is something that we have to get refocused on. You know, I do those walks in the woods. Sometimes I actually there's a park not too far from my office. I will take clients and we'll go for a walk. I'm into grounding. I need all of the earth energy. I will take my shoes off. My wife will come home and find me walking out in the yard barefoot. Hey, you know me. Okay. Even in my office, clients are always amazed. I'm walking around barefoot. This is a shoeless environment. Okay. We just reconnecting. We've got to do more of that, and reconnecting with our relationship with everything in creation. Okay, not just
and ourselves.
And ourselves. So as we close this out, everyone can name maybe a book or two that they would suggest a person who wants to begin this path of healing. And as we this, like we said, the subject is so big that we're just touching on it because we could have touched on domestic violence and how that's a generational thing, alcoholism, and but Dr. Beckham, we'll start with yourself. And we'll just go around.
Actually, we brought it up before, but I do believe that Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of Freedom is one of the best books I ever read that freed me and gave me a different outlook as far as how to work within my own frame of being in the future anyway.
Okay. Can you name?
One book that I stand tall on will be a Message to the Black Man from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That book really opened my eyes to reality, like what's really going on and getting to know myself and who I am. So, yeah.
Okay.
One I recently read that I hate I waited this long to read it was The Long Walk Home by Nelson Mandela. Talk about a life well lived, and just a modern marvel of a man. I would say definitely that's a book I wish we could all make some time. It is a big book,
right?
It's a good read, though.
But it is a darn fine book.
Okay. And I'm gonna, I would say definitely Message to the Black Man, of course. And I have one by Dr. Amos Wilson called The Falsification of African Consciousness. Powerful book. So with that, I want to thank you all for, helping us to understand a little bit more about this dis-ease of the mind called generational trauma. And so with that, I would like to thank all of you for coming out and joining us, and for you who are watching, and may God continue to bless you and your family with the light of truth and understanding. All right.